Welcome to the Magna AI podcast, where we sit down with principals, district leaders, and instructional innovators who are reshaping what's possible in the classroom with a little help from AI. Together, we explore how school leaders are using smart tools and bold ideas to support teachers, personalize learning, and improve outcomes for every student. Hello, listeners. Welcome to another exciting episode of Magna AI podcast. Today, we have with us Corine Doll, who serves as the Director of Curriculum and Instruction at Huber Heights City Schools in Ohio. Corine is leading the department responsible for development, implementation, and assessment of all subject matter across the district's educational programs. Her responsibilities include coordinating district science fair, district spelling bee, project Lead the Way initiatives, while overseeing teacher resources for dyslexia and various testing protocols. So we are really excited to have Corinne over here. Corinne, do you want to take a minute to talk about your journey here and how you got here and what keeps you excited?
Yeah. So I started as a teacher in Northridge Local in Dayton, very small district, about 100 students per grade. I taught there, I think, about 10 years, and then I became a curriculum coach in Springfield City Schools, and then eventually a curriculum coordinator in the Department of Teaching, Learning, and Professional Development. Came to Huber Heights 4 years ago as a secondary curriculum supervisor, based different title, same role, just different grade levels. And then after my first year there, I was the director of curriculum instruction and assessment. And underneath that also falls professional development.
Let's dive right into it. I want to start with the topic of importance of evidence-based literacy approaches in schools. And I saw that you recently introduced the science of reading framework. And so, can you talk a little bit about how that implementation has influenced curriculum development?
Absolutely. When I was in Springfield, I had the opportunity to do letters training as a coordinator, and it just kind of blew my mind in taking a scientific approach to understanding how students acquire learning skills. And read Learning to Read at the Speed of Light. It was a different book, but really talked about the brain science behind the different portions of the brain that the students have to learn, or any reader has to learn to work together to read, to be a fluent. And then, fluency is even the next step. So when I joined the team in Heber Heights, they were getting ready to really uh, tackle literacy and taking the students to the next level, but they were still at the ground floor. So we formed a literacy team because when I was there and I'm asking questions and I'm looking around, just a hodgepodge of resources and approaches across 5 different building elementary sites. And we are a district that does have mobility in our student population. So, it really hurts a student when they go to one school for first grade and are getting, a certain mode of reading instruction. And then they go to a different building in the same district, and those teachers have a different set of resources and a different set of things that they like to use. So we really wanted to take a comprehensive approach. We wanted to match what the state was asking us to do because there was legislation behind that in the state of Ohio. So we had a lot of different buckets. And at the same time, our district was redoing the strategic plan. So we had a lot of different pieces to pull together to make sense out of, to create a plan that was going to last a little bit longer than just checking off boxes so that we can tell the state, yeah, we're following the law. And so we put together a literacy team. And we had in our goals, I actually pulled it up here so I could refer to it, that we wanted to make an intentional alignment across our federal funding. In Ohio, we call that the One Needs and the CCIP. Across our strat plan, our strategic plan, we wanted to align it with the district, the building, the teacher level goals, and really also tie in some of that Ohio principal evaluation rubric, because we needed instructional building leaders that were going to be able to make sure that whatever resource we chose, whatever strategies we were going to use in the classroom, were being used by teachers. Because it's one thing to pay for it, it's one thing to have it written down, it's one thing to get it board approved. But if it's not reaching our students in a meaningful way, it's not going to have any impact. So we really took a very global approach to how do we make sense of all of these different pieces for our teachers, for our principals and leaders, and for our families. How are families going to feel when what we've been told them, like reading by osmosis, if you just put a kid near a book, if you just expose them to enough words, they're going to become readers. When that's going away, and we're taking a more scientific approach, and we're reporting reading gains differently because everything looks different. And we aligned our assessments. There wasn't a rock we didn't look under to look for ways that we can make all of this comprehensive and cohesive.
Yeah, you raised a good point. Like it's different to actually decide on a program and then get its approval, but actually implementation is a totally different beast. So, can you talk a little bit about challenges that educators face when adopting new literacy programs?
Oh, absolutely. It's like going through the stages of death. When I myself learned about through letters, I had an oh my gosh moment where, as a fourth grade teacher, I had to look back and go, I could have potentially even done harm to kids who were struggling readers because I was using the approaches that I was taught. I was using the materials that my district provided, but those weren't the best ways and the best things. And, students that were on speech IEPs when really they didn't have any phonics instruction. And so they couldn't sound out letters. They didn't know how their mouth needed to be shaped to produce the correct sounds that are associated with the letters. So there's almost this stages of grief you go through. And then generally we notice that teachers either get stubborn and they get locked in because personally, I feel like they had so much guilt perhaps over the way that they had taught, or you get teachers that go, "Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I know that this is what my students need. I have seen these gaps in my classrooms and I tried this material and it is working." And students are making gains. And eventually you get all of them there because you always have those early adopters, and then you got the middle group and then you have the laggers at the end. But it is a struggle when you're fundamentally changing instruction in K-6 classrooms.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Now, it I was looking at it, and it seems like Ohio has a lot of different types of assessments, like state tests, college readiness, English proficiency. So, how do you balance the need for these different kinds of assessments and the programs that are there to support students?
So we have an assessment team and we have a assessment supervisor who works in my department, who she's my guru in all things testing. She's going to all the meetings. She's keeping up on all of the state requirements that are coming out because there's a new one, K3 math diagnostic. There's going to be some requirement. We're not exactly sure what yet. Um, and then we're really intentional and we try to align whatever assessment that we've selected with our curriculum as well, because we don't want it to be wildly different. And it needs to help the teachers measure the impact of their instruction. It's one thing to measure what a student already knows. When you take those early fall assessments, that's without any impact of me as the teacher. And then whatever you're assessing, the next time you're assessing it, it's not just about what has the student learned, because the problem might be, or the reason might be, I shouldn't say the problem, the reason might be the instruction didn't match the assessment. So it's really digging in every time we're looking at an assessment to what was the purpose of this? Was it measuring our curriculum and our pacing through the curriculum? Is it measuring just knowledge in general, like a diagnostic? Or is it measuring something? Because we have gifted assessments as well. We have those EL assessments. Is it measuring acquisition of language? And really trying to be mindful of what it's telling us, who it's telling us something about, and how can we use it.
Yeah, very interesting. So, you brought an interesting point where like whether the when what you're assessing actually is measuring what the students are learning. So, can you talk a little bit about like how do you measure the effectiveness of a literacy program?
Right, and this is something that we keep having to remind our teachers of as well. So iReady is not something that's going to measure our instruction or our resource that we're using for the curriculum, because it's a different type of assessment. So we're looking at the program that we chose to adopt was Amplify. It's got curriculum-based assessments. that are paced with the instruction. So if we want to ask what is instruction looking like in the classroom so that we can measure if it's successful, and it's successful, we had to define, well, what's successful instruction? Well, it's instruction where students are learning more. And students are going to learn more based on the instruction that they receive, the pacing of that instruction, the supports of that instruction. So, was a student receiving the proper tiers? Are they in an intervention group? All these things come together, and it feels like a lot to teachers, but I think we're really approaching teachers feeling comfortable talking assessments, using diagnostics in their discussion with moving students around in intervention groups because it's a lot of moving pieces. And in Ohio, we have a lot of required assessments from the state.
So now let's move to the topic of role of hands-on learning in student engagement. Uh, can you talk about any successful hands-on learning initiative that you have implemented?
Well, right now we're doing a lot with CTE, or technical education at our high school. So in Ohio, a lot of schools back in the 70s joined joint vocational schools. There was an initiative, you had to either opt in or opt out. If you opted out, you had to provide it in your own high school. Well, it was a lot cheaper to opt in. And then, you joined a joint vocational, and that's where your kids went junior and senior year to learn about welding, to learn about auto body repair, to learn about blood testing, so many different. Now they do drones, and they add programs all the time, veterinary skills. So our students were going to the JBS, but a lot of them were coming back. And so as we were asking them, well, why didn't you stay engaged in these programs? They wanted to be with their friends that they grew up with. They didn't want to have to go to a different location. So we started looking at what can we offer here. We partnered with NBCTC for the first couple classes that we had: multimedia, urban agriculture. They came to our school. They sent their instructors to our school because it doesn't take a lot to start those programs. They didn't need a specialized classroom. Then when we received our ESSER dollars, the board, I wasn't here at that time, I wasn't in Huber, that board decided we're going to invest some of this money into making an addition. And in that addition, we're going to put in HVAC, welding, and welding, and carpentry. So these three giant classrooms were added. They have labs on the outside. They're very specialized. The enrollment in it and the interest in it has been huge. We're having to turn students away from our own inside programs. And then most recently, while I was in Huber, the secondary supervisor wrote a grant and it was received, and it was 2.3 million. And he built a robotics lab, and he refurbished some of the other labs so that we can offer more engineering, and partnered with, I mean, his grant that he wrote was absolutely outstanding. Partnered with local suppliers of machinery and technology for our local job market. So our students are ready to meet the demand of what's being asked of them here in Dayton. And, by using these heat mats, he went to the Chamber of Commerce a lot, talked to people constantly. What skills are our students missing? What skills do they need to get these high paying jobs? And it has been hugely successful. And our students are so excited. Our teachers are excited. There's so much pride now, and not that there wasn't before, but the pride in what we're offering students and where we're going it's palpable when you walk in that building. It's really exciting.
That's great. Yeah, you talked about the robotics program integration and so on. Can you talk a little bit about the integration of hands-on activities similar to robotics within like STEM curricula?
Yes. So at our junior high, we do a lot of the PTLW programs. And again, our secondary supervisor has done a lot to expand that, purchasing a lot of the 3D printers, these really cool 3D printers that can do really neat things so that you can even put like a little engine in it, like an electronic engine, and create these little robots. And keeping those teachers trained and keeping them engaged in professional development so that they can keep up with all of the changes that are happening. And that's down into the 7th grade at Weisenborn. And then we also partnered with the NBCTC, and they sent us an instructor to do like these mini courses so that when kids are in 7th and 8th grade, depending on their schedule, they can sign up to take those, like an intro, like an intro to HVAC, an intro to engineering, so that they can start thinking, if they haven't been exposed to that, what does that career path look like? Do I see myself engaging in that career path? What educational decisions do I need to make now to end up where I want to be in 2 or 3 more years?
Now with the AI coming on the horizon, can you talk a little bit about like how students might be using it for their learning experiences?
Yeah, so we engaged in a PD with our local ESC, our educational center, to create our AI playbook, which was required by the state. So we had to have a board policy, and then we had to have a manual that says, how are we going to integrate AI in the classroom? What are we going to do to support teachers and parents? And it was really kind of specific about the different areas that we had to address. Like, how are we going to address acknowledging when a student has used AI when they're supposed to? Like, how do you cite that? Like, kind of when we think about research papers and how we had to cite our sources for research papers, how do you cite utilizing AI in your work? And then also talking about what are we going to do if a student uses AI and they weren't supposed to, which is, the flip side of that coin. As a part of that work, we did listening sessions, and this was a tool that they taught us at this PD. And you just ask a question and you pass a recording device. I used my district issue phone, passed it around. The students spoke right into it. And so they're standing in this circle and they're listening to each other answer the question, and then they're getting to answer. And so as the device passes around, the answers, some kids will say, yeah, I do what Jeff said he does, but I do that, I don't use Claude, I use ChatGTP because it does this or that better. So the answers just get more rich as it passes through the circle. And one of the things that I learned that I had not even understood was how often students are engaging with AI for things like, hey, should I wear this outfit today? And they'll show AI their outfit. And at first I thought they meant, oh, because of the weather. Like, I'm thinking like my age, like, yeah, you want to make sure you're warm, and, if it's going to be a cold day. And they were like, no, Mrs. Doll, we want to know if it's a cool outfit. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, aren't you guys really worried about losing your autonomy if you're asking AI how it thinks you look? And then the girls were all over that question. Well, sometimes I do worry about that. And sometimes I don't listen. And then this one other girl said, well, AI always tells you you're right. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, doesn't matter what your outfit looks like. It'll say, oh, queen, that's the most beautiful outfit. And I had no idea that was happening. So then I asked the boys, I said, are you guys using AI to get your outfits checked or to ask for dating advice? Oh, no. Unanimously, the boys were absolutely would not admit to it. And I said, that doesn't sound accurate. You're telling me only girls talk to AI. So I kind of picked up on this fact that there's a little bit of shame for boys, surrounding boys, at least in my district, about admitting that they're talking to AI. They're all doing it, but the boys specifically did not want to talk about it, which I just thought was super interesting because it's already developing a culture for our young students around the use of it and what you admit to and what you don't admit to, being a boy or being a girl. It was just super interesting for me. And this also shocked me. In the 7th and 8th grade, there were quite a few students that were concerned about data centers and AI. And I had not expected that, and I was just really wowed at their use of it, their fluency in it, and their awareness of it. And it just really shocked me. And I was like, I got to step up my AI game because I'm way behind these kids.
Yeah, yeah, that's very interesting insights. Yeah, it's coming means it's not something that you can actually keep away. It's how their students and kids are going to interact with it. So yeah, might as well actually start embracing it. So you alluded to professional development a couple of times. So let's talk about that a little bit. So can you talk about what are some of the key components of effective professional development programs?
So there's, of course, anytime you bring in something new, you have to introduce it, you have to train it. I think that's more falls under the training portion of professional development. Just this is how you ride the bike. And then we always like to follow up with, okay, so you've ridden the bike around the block a few times. What are some questions that you have? Because often we start the PD before the school year. Most districts have that. So they're being introduced to a product that they've not actually had a chance to use with students to actually use in a way that matters. They they call them sandbox accounts for us, and the teachers try it out, and they have fake students, and that's fine, but it's always different once their students get loaded into the account. The first time they have to walk students through accessing it, and really the timeline between, "This is the new product, now go," is short. Or if we try to jump ahead, because 'cause I've tried that, we're gonna get them trained before they leave. Well, then it's too long, and then they forget everything because it's a new product and you kinda have to jump in and use it. So we like to do touch points and like semester, a quarter if we can. A lot of times we have tech paras of what we call them. They're just like technology people in the buildings. So could they go and check in on a teacher, especially if it has any kind of login component? That seems to be the toughest like hurdle just for can you ride the bike? And then the next year, we wanna go, "Okay, so now we have this data on your students, on yourself. What do we do with it? Where can we get better? Where can we get more fluent in if it's a curriculum that we're teaching, if it's an assessment that we're trying to integrate?" So now we're gonna go to the next level, and we're going to see how we can integrate this with something else, or what else can we do with this? What's the next step? And then there's that maintenance training. So, if anybody has been in the district 2 or 3 years, do you need to re-up your learning on this or bring in the rep so that they can tell you? Because it's, technology pieces especially, they're always adding new things, new portions to make the platform better. So then you get your new teacher, so you have to have first year training again for those. So it's a lot of even with like iReady, our continuous users, and then our building principals because they're the admin. So you're not testing kids and you're not the teacher in there. But how do you know teachers are using it correctly when we're talking about locking kids in with MTSS and intervention services? So for any one product, as simple as it sounds, there are 6 or 7 different buckets that we have to look at yearly.
What kind of feedback mechanisms do you have in place for like continuous improvement once you have implemented? I think you were talking about like first year versus coming back. Yep.
So we track our students' performance on Ohio's assessments. They have EOCs at the high school level in Ohio State test, OSTs, 3 through 8th grade. And fifth and eighth grade, they have science, but the other years it's math and reading. That directly feeds into our report card. So and we could talk forever about the validity of that assessment. It's real. It's being used to inform legislature. It's being used. Our tax base is looking at it. Our taxpayers in the community are looking at it to judge, like, oh, am I getting my tax dollars worth out of this local school system? So we have to use that as a measure. We use iReady as a measure, and then we're starting to fold in some subjective measures. We have a lot of the objective student test scores. So now subjectively, how do we add in what we see? How do we go into a classroom and look at instruction and look at student learning and start making the connection between what we see, what the test scores say, what our building assessments say, and go to the next step.
Earlier, you talked a little bit about uh, how you address the churn in the hands-on learning program for students. Can you talk a bit about like how do you address like teacher retention challenges through professional development or other
Oh
means?
man, yeah, yeah, that's a tough one, especially in Ohio right now. Um, it's coming out of COVID and hearing teachers who taught for 10 or 15 years and say that it's becoming such a struggle, and a lot of that is around the changing requirements from the state. And a lot of that is around behaviors that they're seeing in classrooms that, they said they haven't seen before, that it's, the rate of different behaviors and what to do with that. So a lot of that, currently, we're trying to survey our teachers. What do you want to learn about? And then getting them some high quality PD connected to that. There is still, in my personal opinion, even though the culture and climate goals don't fall under my department. When that time comes to have the climate and the culture match up with curriculum and instruction. I think that's gonna be the real sweet spot that we see teachers feeling like, the 360's been completed and what they're struggling with due to just the changing dynamics of classroom and students and all these different pieces, and how that teacher efficacy piece of how do I feel I'm doing as a teacher, we're gonna see those connected. And just really struggled going, do I just like go to my superintendent and say, give me the climate and culture because I'm going to intentionally match it to all of these goals because the climate and culture should reflect what our teachers are doing, what our classrooms are doing. And because if our classrooms are successful, our climate and culture should be successful because you can't separate the two of those. So and so they should confirm each other. And where they don't, that's where we as the district leaders need to really zero in and find out what is happening. Because if we don't address it on either side, it's going to affect the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those mechanisms of feedback loop are really important. Cool. Uh, Now let's move to the topic of impact of curriculum alignment on academic performance. So, how do you approach aligning curricular content with assessment strategies? I think you briefly mentioned that, right, between learning and assessment, the different approaches. So, yeah, we would love to hear.
Yeah, it's tough because like, when we did our giant KA curriculum for literacy and reading and that it was a much different product, much different approach than the teachers in Hebrew had ever had. And so it had an instructional component for everything, for the phonics, for the comprehension, for the fluency, for the literature, for the nonfiction. And there was like a people problem involved with I don't want to give up my old things, but I like this. I found this on Teacher Paid Teacher, and this works for me. This works for my classroom. Don't I have the autonomy to choose what I get to use because I am a good teacher? Look at my test scores. So you have to give up a little bit of that autonomy and what you as a teacher, what you identify with that you think made you successful because again, we're going to a comprehensive goal. So that's a struggle. And then you have like this implementation dip, and that's a part of the science of picking a new curriculum is for a year, the teacher's learning how to ride the bike. So, and they only get to teach it once. When I used to teach high school English, I taught ninth grade English 8 periods. So in the morning, by the time I started, a unit in the morning and then I taught it again at the end of the day, I had, 7 opportunities to get better and better and see what worked and improve, make little tweaks. A first grade teacher teaches it once and they're not going to teach that same lesson again until the next year. So it takes longer to get fluent as a teacher in using a resource, an approach, and they were doing both at the same time. They had gone back now we're teaching explicit phonics instruction where they had not done that for years and years and years because everybody was just gonna let kids absorb their ability to read. And, that was really tough because there was a dip in student scores and achievement because teachers had to learn how to use something. So it wasn't like the first year we adopted Amplify, all these kids were amazing and they were scoring at the top. But now we can see every year our ELA scores are improving and they're improving all the way to the top because we're sending readers who are better able to read, who have a richer vocabulary, who have word attack skills, who can sound things out, who understand roots and suffixes and prefixes to a greater degree than we ever have before. So we're seeing this progression of improving scores, or like the science and the social studies, government, history, those biology, those places are improving because students are better readers and they're attacking instructional, or informational text better. So, but it does take so you really have to explain to your school board, to your principals, your supervisors that it's not a magic pill where at the end of this 8 months, we're going to see dynamically different test scores. The it takes years of working this system to fix and to align all these problems.
Makes sense. Yeah, that was actually my next question in terms of benefits of cross-curricular integration in lessons, and you just answered because, like, with ELA, it starts to impact the outcomes in others. Anything else you can think of there in terms of the cross-curricular?
Oh, our math scores have just gone in places we didn't last year, Algebra 1, and this was, again, about using data. So, we created these really in-depth, long as long as a student has been with us, tracking their scores on EOC or OSTs, Ohio State tests, and iReady. So, that would have been 2 points, and then the state test is the 3rd point. And using that to plug students into the next appropriate instructional math placement. So last year for 8th grade algebra students, 97% scored proficient. All of them, score like, got a passing score on it. And, like, the year before, I think it was something like 34 or 35% because
Oh,
students
wow.
were being placed in Algebra 1 that weren't ready for Algebra 1. And so now we had this progression of test scores and information about the next instructional class that a student was ready for to engage in and be successful in. And it has just, it was like going to the chiropractor essentially for our math instruction and really being intentional about the alignment and looking at our students' scores intentionally and tracking it and making specific. At one point, our high school principal was meeting with his math team and his reading team once quarterly. And they were looking and they were making decisions individually based on every student. And they were looking also at classroom grades, which at one point were 100% matching what the assessments were saying that a student was ready for. And it's that kind of support from the principal level as well that makes this work possible.
Makes sense. So that's congratulations on actually improving all the math scores. That sounds wonderful. Now that you have actually reached that point, what challenges do you think like schools face in maintaining that level and then actually maintaining the curricular alignment that you have strived to achieve so far?
I think a lot of it is just the legislature that comes out because, in Ohio, I'm sure it sounds great in Columbus and it sounds really great when you're sitting with, people that are experts. Every school district in Ohio is so different. So they're trying to write legislature that makes sense, that is aimed for improving the educational experience. And then we also have a really big movement about property taxes because property taxes are one of the main ways Ohio schools are funded. And so they're getting a lot of pressure about reducing property taxes, and everything is costing more these days. Every prescription subscription that we have to an assessment to a curriculum resource is more expensive than it has ever been. And um, so it is really tough to help your staff, your parents, and your families understand the changes that you're undergoing without sounding too jargony and too, out of touch with them. So a lot of it is about making sure that people understand the pieces that are going into the decisions that you're making without them, kind of glazing over and going, "Oh my gosh, you just said so many words and none of them mean anything to me." Like, did my kid pass? What is my kid did my kid going to get a diploma? And trying to really explain how they're going to reach that diploma. And also being really good fiscal stewards because more than ever right now in Ohio, there's a fiscal climate where people are upset about property taxes and just but in spite of all of that or alongside all of that, we have to maintain our goals for students and we have to maintain our hopefulness in their futures. And that's why we're here is to make sure that they have a hopeful future when they leave our doors.
Wonderful. So now we're getting into the last leg. So I would like to have a lightning round, share some questions with you. So if you
Okay.
can, what's the best leadership book that you read recently, and would you recommend it?
Recently, I did not read this recently, but I love this book and I refer to it so much. It's Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. And I know it's fluffy and feely, but that is the kind of leader I am. I'm a fluffy, feely, hug somebody leader. It's we're gonna make changes, but we got to make changes through people.
Oh, I haven't read it, but I'll put it
Oh, you
on.
haven't read it?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. You're gonna have to call me back because I
Okay.
want to know everything that you think about it.
All right, great. Uh, Biggest myth about AI in education?
That it's gonna steal our kids' ability to think. As I think that the only thing that's gonna steal our kids' ability to think is if we don't be very thoughtful about what we're doing with it. It's not AI that's stealing anything. It's our unfocused about what we're protecting.
What skill are you most worried that today's students won't have tomorrow?
I wouldn't say I'm scared, but I think that the skill that we need to protect the most is critical thinking and being able to discreetly discriminate. Like, we talk again about AI. AI will hallucinate. So how is a student going to know if it's hallucinating and it's making something up? Well, they have to be very critical, and they have to be very discreet about what they're looking at, and they have to ask good questions.
One piece of advice that you'd like to give somebody entering the realm of curriculum and instruction and assessments?
Oh, man, this is a good one because I kinda had this discussion the other day because somebody said, "Oh, I just gotta get out of the classroom. I would love to do what you're doing. I just the classroom is too much." And I thought and I said, as well as thinking, that if you're looking to escape the classroom, don't go into leadership. Every day, I think that, my life would be so much easier if I could go back to the classroom. And right now in leadership, it's tough. You have to have broad shoulders. You have to ask good questions and you have to be able to listen to answers that you don't like. And so if you think you're going to go into leadership and escape something, you're wrong.
Yeah, so true. So thank you so much, Corrine, for your time and wonderful insights and discussion. I'm sure our listeners would love it. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you too. This has been very interesting and fun. My first time.
Thank you. Have a story, question, or insight from your own classroom or campus? We would love to hear from you. Thanks for tuning in to the Magna AI podcast. Be sure to follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube and learn more at magnaeducation.ai. Because when we support teachers with the right tools, we unlock what's possible for every learner.